never wanted the cabin. It came to me after Uncle Raymond passed, unexpectedly and with no heirs besides me. He wasn't close family, just a reclusive old man who rarely visited, and when he did, he was always quiet, distant. I hadn't seen him since I was 12, and now, at 33, his lawyer was calling to tell me I'd inherited a small property out in the Pine Needle Valley. The cabin sat on the edge of nowhere, 2 hours past the last gas station, buried deep in a forest that didn't feel welcoming. But curiosity and the prospect of ownership overrode my discomfort. So one foggy Friday afternoon, I packed some essentials and drove out. As the road turned from pavement to gravel, and then gravel to mud-slicked dirt, I saw fewer signs of civilization. It felt like traveling back in time. By the time I reached the place, night was pressing in, and the trees had begun to loom like silent watchers. The cabin was smaller than I remembered, just one story, with a steep roof and weather-beaten wood. A sagging porch with chipped steps, windows coated in a thin layer of grime. The key the lawyer gave me worked, but I had to shoulder the door open. Inside, it smelled like old wood and dust, like time had stopped moving. There was something eerily preserved about the space. Furniture neatly arranged, books on shelves, coffee cups still stacked. And in the corner of the living room, sitting on a small table beneath a doily, was a large, boxy object, a radio. Not one of those modern plastic things, but an old console model from the 1940s, with big brass dials and a speaker wrapped in faded cloth. I stared at it for a moment. It looked almost theatrical, like it belonged in a movie. The strange thing was, despite being covered in dust like everything else, there was something disturbingly clean about the tuning dial, as if someone had used it recently. The rest of the evening was uneventful. I brought in my things, lit the old stove, and read by lantern light. The silence outside was total. No passing cars, no wind, no animals. Just trees. Lots and lots of trees. Before bed, I glanced once more at the radio. It was unplugged. That night, I lay on the creaky old bed and listened to the strange hum of the silence. It's hard to explain, but if you've ever been truly alone in the woods, you know what I mean. The quiet isn't peaceful. It's dense, oppressive, as if the trees are leaning in to hear you breathe. And right before I drifted off, I thought I heard something faint. A pop, a crackle, like the turning of a dial. But I told myself it was nothing. Probably the stove cooling down, maybe an old pipe. I closed my eyes, but it didn't stop there. I woke up at 2:13 a.m., not because I was cold or thirsty, but because of a voice. It wasn't loud. In fact, it was barely audible, like a whisper layered under static. But it was real. I sat up in bed, my skin cold and damp. The cabin was pitch black, save for the faint red glow of embers in the stove. And from the living room, I could hear it. A low hum, then words, faint, garbled. I stepped out of the bedroom, heart pounding. The sound grew clearer. The radio was on, but it was still unplugged. It sat exactly where I'd left it, yet now the tuning dial glowed faintly, and soft crackling filled the room. I watched, frozen, as the dial slowly turned on its own. The speaker sputtered and hissed, then settled on a voice. "Don't go outside. It watches when the trees go quiet." The voice was old, female, brittle and monotone, like an automated message playing from another time. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop with every word. "Don't open the door. It waits behind the glass." The hairs on my arms stood on end. My eyes drifted toward the front door. Someone, or something, was standing on the porch. A tall silhouette just outside the window. It didn't move. It didn't knock. It just stood there, too still to be human, its head slightly tilted toward the cabin, as if listening. Then the radio changed. You shouldn't be here." The voice was male this time, rough, clipped, like someone spitting words through clenched teeth. I could hear something else underneath, like breathing. Wet, labored breathing. From the radio, from the window. My feet were rooted to the floor. I couldn't speak, couldn't even blink. "It remembers your name." The voice was getting louder, sharper. The static rose like a scream hidden behind white noise. "It saw you when you were 12. My stomach twisted. Uncle Raymond. I hadn't been here since I was a child. But I remembered now, just a fragment. A night like this, cold, alone in the dark, and hearing voices from that same radio. I turned and ran to the stove, grabbed the fire poker, and marched to the radio. Without thinking, I smashed it. Once, twice, again. The speaker caved in with a burst of sparks. The dial went dark. Silence. I ran to the window. The figure was gone. I didn't sleep. I sat. We always knew the forest was strange. When we were kids, our parents warned us to never cross past the old iron fence. "That's the ranger's land," they'd say. "Unsafe terrain. Nothing for you there." But we all knew that wasn't true. We knew what really happened there. In 1976, 6 children vanished during a school field trip into Pine Bend Forest. No bodies were found, no clues, no signs of struggle. Just their backpacks, left in a perfect circle around an old tree stump. I didn't think much of it growing up, just urban legends to keep kids in check. But then my friend Wes decided to hike there last month. He wanted to photograph the site for a college project, modern myth and folklore. The fool actually thought he'd find evidence of a hoax. We didn't hear from him for 3 days. Search and rescue found his body near the same clearing where the kids disappeared. His expression, I'll never forget it. Eyes wide open, mouth agape like he died mid-scream. No signs of injury, not a single wound. The funeral was closed casket, but that wasn't the end. Because 2 nights after the burial, I heard him calling my name. From the woods, I thought I was losing my mind. Wes was dead. I'd seen the funeral. But his voice came from the woods, soft and pleading. "Eli, help me. I'm still here." At first, I tried to explain it away. Stress, grief, maybe a cruel prank. But I wasn't the only one who heard it. Jen heard it too. And Mark. Always just after sunset, always coming from the same direction, Pine Bend. Then one night, Jen didn't show up for work. She'd gone out, alone, to prove something. We found her car by the trailhead. Her phone was on the front seat, still recording. The last thing she said before the scream cut the audio was, "Wes? Is that you?" Her body was found the next morning, lying in the same circle where Wes died. Same position, same expression. Eyes wide open, mouth frozen in silent terror. No wounds. Mark snapped after that. He kept muttering about the wrong ones coming back. He said the forest doesn't just keep the dead, it twists them. He said the children who vanished in 1976 never left, but they weren't children anymore. He left me a voicemail last night, right before he went out there. I saw them, Eli. They're wearing the same clothes they disappeared in, but their faces are all wrong. They called to me in Wes's voice, in Jen's voice. They remember us. They want us. Please don't listen if they call your name. Mark never came back. Now I keep the curtains drawn. I leave the lights on. Because some nights, like tonight, I still hear Wes, his voice outside the window, whispering, "Eli, you're the last one now. Let us in." And I don't know how much longer I can resist. I moved into my new apartment last month. It wasn't much, Just a 22nd floor, one-bedroom unit with faded yellow wallpaper and a rusted balcony that barely passed as safe. But it was quiet, and most importantly, it was mine. I'd always lived with roommates, so when I finally got a place of my own, I relished the silence. That is, until the first night. Around 2 a.m., I noticed a strange hum. Faint at first, like a low, distant vibration. It was coming from the air vent above my bed, a small square grill high up on the wall. I ignored it the first few nights, assuming it was just part of the building's outdated ventilation system. But it got louder. By the 5th night, the hum had become a kind of droning pulse, soft during the day, loudest just after midnight. It would stop the moment I turned the lights on, and resume exactly 5 minutes after I turned them off. I started to dread bedtime. One night, I stood on a chair to get a better look inside the vent. The metal slats were dusty, and all I could see in the dark was blackness. I waved my phone flashlight inside. Nothing, just ductwork and shadow. But when I turned off the light and stepped down, I heard it. A single click from inside the vent, like a fingernail tapping metal. After that night, the night I heard the click, I couldn't sleep. I started staying up until dawn with every light on, telling myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Then came the eye. It happened on a Wednesday. I was brushing my teeth. The hum had started early that evening. I leaned against the sink and glanced up at the vent. And there it was, staring back. A single unblinking eye, bloodshot, with a milky film over it, lodged deep in the blackness of the vent. It wasn't a hallucination. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It just watched. I screamed. I grabbed a broom and jabbed at the vent. Nothing. The eye vanished. I called the building manager. He rolled his eyes, muttered something about nerves, and promised to send maintenance. They never showed. The next night, I covered the vent with duct tape and cardboard. The humming stopped. For a while. That weekend, I went to visit a neighbor, Mrs. Dubrowski, an old woman on the 21st floor who liked to gossip about tenants. I asked if anyone had complained about strange noises. Her eyes widened. They sealed the 23rd floor last year, after that girl disappeared. You didn't hear? She whispered. Used to be someone living up there. Real quiet type. The kind that watches. That night, I barely made it to midnight before the humming started again. This time, not from the wall, from the floor vent, then the ceiling, then the closet. I grabbed my things and left. I never went back. The lease, the furniture, none of it mattered. Because once you've seen it, once it's seen you, it doesn't need a vent anymore.